politics and the pulpit. Republicans failed to include a repeal of the Johnson Amendment in the final tax bill. We'll tell you why. Net neutrality. Will the end of an Obama-era regulation on the internet change the web as we know it? We hash it out. The Apostolic Nuncio. Part 2 of Lauren Ashburn's exclusive interview with the Vatican's top diplomat in the U.S. And "Oh Come Let Us Adore Him." A Washington, D.C. couple shows us their impressive collection of nativity scenes. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, December 15th, 2017. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. President Trump delivers a blistering attack on the FBI, calling the agency disgraceful after a top investigator is accused of political bias. And the president once again denies any collusion with Russia. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump says he wants to rebuild the FBI and make it better. He's upset not only with the Russia probe, but also with the pass he thinks the federal agency gave Hillary Clinton during its investigation into her emails.
When you look at what's gone on with the FBI and with the Justice Department, people are very, very angry.
President Trump joins Republican lawmakers who earlier this week questioned the independence of the Russia probe. They accuse members of special counsel Robert Mueller's team of being politically biased.
He really needs to clean house. I think he needs to vet the people he's working with, because I think he's undermining public confidence in his own investigation.
Republicans say a top FBI investigator softened the Hillary Clinton email investigation, sent personal text messages critical of Trump, and yet was assigned to the Russia investigation against the Trump campaign team.
Well, it's a shame what's happened with the FBI, but we're going to rebuild the FBI. It'll be bigger and better than ever. But it is very sad when you look at those documents, and how they've done that is really, really disgraceful.
And President Trump continues to deny any collusion with Russia.
I didn't make a phone call to Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia. Everybody knows it. That was a Democrat hoax. It was an excuse for losing the election.
Democrats see it differently. This week, the Senate Intelligence Committee questioned Donald Trump Jr. behind closed doors.
I think when you look at Donald Trump Jr. and what is on the record, I think there was clearly an intent to collude.
The Senate Intelligence Committee may issue its first recommendations early next year on protecting American elections from foreign tampering, but we may have to wait to hear the committee's verdict on more controversial findings like possible Russian collusion. Wyatt?
And even if we have to wait, we will, and continue to follow this story. White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Republicans finalized their sweeping tax package, expanding the child tax credit and winning the support of Senator Marco Rubio. One of the Republican negotiators on the bill, Senator Rob Portman, says he's confident his party will have the votes. GOP senators are trying to push the bill through Congress next week. If they do, it will give President Donald Trump his first major legislative victory. Republican efforts to allow preachers to endorse political candidates fall short. President Trump promised to repeal the Johnson Amendment on the campaign trail, but now that item is being scrapped from the final tax bill. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has more. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. The Johnson Amendment is a 1954 part of law that threatens to strip the tax-exempt status of preachers and charities who endorse or condemn political candidates. Generally, here in Congress, the debate falls along party lines. Senator James Lankford, a Republican from Oklahoma, says he's disappointed that the Johnson Amendment won't be repealed. He blames the ambiguity of the current tax code for keeping nonprofits in constant fear. But Democrat Ron Wyden of Oregon is pleased. He says the mandate preserves the sanctity of our religious institutions. We turn to Father Thomas Petrie of EWTN's Morning Glory for the Catholic point of view. He tells me he doesn't like to get into party politics, but prefers to stick to church teaching.
I prefer, when I'm catechizing and preaching, to really stick to the issues and to draw very strong lines of thought to conclusions that are quite clearly indicate, well, he's talking about this candidate who does these things without actually mentioning candidates by name.
The U.S. Bishops' Conference didn't officially weigh in on the Johnson Amendment, but Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore said about it, As a general rule, it's not good for churches to engage in partisan politics. Wyatt?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Democrats are denouncing the FCC for striking down Obama-era regulations on the internet.
So yesterday was a bad day, particularly at the holiday season, because the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality, being the Grinch for the hundreds of millions of tech users.
But did the FCC really steal Christmas, or did consumers get a gift? To weigh in, we're joined by Baron Zoka, president of the Tech Freedom, a think tank focused on the legal challenges in technology. Baron, first off, in layman's terms, what is net neutrality and what does this mean for FCC and use the internet?
It's not a controversial idea. It's the idea that, as a Republican chairman of the FCC said back in 2004, consumers should choose what they do online. They should have the freedom to connect to the sites they want to, use the devices they want to. That basic idea has never been controversial. It's been confused with a particular set of regulations that the Obama-era FCC has tried to put in place.
And so there's been a lot of outrage, as you know, ever since FCC's vote yesterday. Netflix, a company that provides the streaming media and video on demand, had this to say, and I want to quote them there: "We're disappointed in the decision to gut net neutrality protections that ushered in an unprecedented era of innovation, creativity, and civic engagement. This is the beginning of a longer legal battle. Netflix stands with innovators, large and small, to oppose this misguided FCC order." Is this an accurate description?
No, nothing about that's accurate, except that, yes, there will be more litigation. We've been in litigation for 10 years. The FCC had never had enforceable rules on the books until 2015, and the internet was just fine because there were other laws that generally police competition, that protect consumers, that applied. Those laws will continue to apply, and if a company, a broadband company, does discriminate against Netflix, that's why we have antitrust laws. But we don't need the FCC to police this area through heavy-handed regulations from the 1930s, which is what the Obama administration had tried to do.
Okay, so setting aside all of the sky is falling rhetoric here that we're hearing, what happens next? What's the timeline?
More litigation, and probably this will continue to be litigated until the next Democrat in the White House, because at the end of the day, the issue we're debating isn't really net neutrality. It's the FCC's authority over the internet. And Republicans, in a nutshell, have always said we should be careful and wary of the FCC having too much power over the internet. Ironically, now that Democrats don't control the FCC, they continue to say, no, the FCC should have broad power. And ultimately, only Congress can really resolve this issue through narrowly crafted legislation that finally answers that question, or the Supreme Court will. And that's what my organization, Tech Freedom, has been doing, has been asking the Supreme Court to limit the power of the federal government, but still make sure that those generally applicable laws of competition and consumer protection continue to apply.
Yeah, well, I think your prediction about this continuing to be a battle is absolutely accurate. Baron Zoka, president of Tech Freedom, thanks so much for talking with us about it.
Thank you.
ISIS issues more threats to cities in the United States and Europe this Christmas. According to the Daily Mail, 3 posters, including one of the National Cathedral in Washington, are used to announce the terrorist group's targets this holiday season. Though the Episcopalian Cathedral is in Washington, D.C., the group uses it to issue threats against New York, saying, quote, "Wait for us, we meet at Christmas in New York soon." Iraqi security forces hold a military parade in Mosul, the first time they've done so since ISIS took control of the city in 2014. Earlier this month, Prime Minister al-Abadi declared victory over the Islamic State. A Christian community in Iraq reconsecrates its first church since the expulsion of ISIS. St. George, a Chaldean Catholic church in Telskov in the Nineveh Plain, reopened on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Archbishop Bashar Warda of Erbil, Iraq, says, quote, "ISIS wanted to eliminate the Christian presence here, but ISIS is gone and the Christians are coming back." Nearly 3 months after Hurricane Maria, more than 1/3 of Puerto Rico is still without power and thousands of businesses remain closed. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says the island's electric grid is expected to reach 75% of customers by the end of January and 95% by the end of February. Hundreds are working to restore power, and they have enough supplies in their inventory to continue until the job is complete. A government commission in Australia tells the Catholic Church it should break the seal of confession. They claim it would help identify child sex abusers. The group also says the church should make celibacy among priests voluntary. The commission interviewed more than 8,000 survivors of sexual abuse, a majority of whom are Catholic. Their new report blames the church for, quote, catastrophic failures of leadership. But Philip Jenkins, a professor at Baylor University who has written about sexual crimes, disagrees with the report's findings. He says there are problems with linking celibacy with sexual abuse, namely that no other groups have been heavily studied and scrutinized as Catholic clergy.
We have literally no idea of how the rate of abuse among clergy or celibate clergy compares to that among any other group.
The Vatican says the report deserves to be studied seriously. The Holy See press office says the church is committed to safe environments for the protection of all children and vulnerable adults. Euthanasia activists in Italy are calling a new law allowing citizens to write living wills and refuse artificial nutrition and hydration a victory. It's the latest move in the country's long-running debate over euthanasia and end-of-life issues. Alessandro Fiore is the spokesperson from the Italian group Pro Vita. It's an association that defends life from conception to natural death. Alessandro joins us from Rome. So tell us, what is your view of this new law? Do you think this is the first step to legalizing euthanasia in Italy?
Yes, I think it was quite a sad day yesterday in Italy because this law on advanced directive on living wills will allow any citizen to oblige a doctor, even years before the actual illness comes to be, and any patient could oblige the doctor to take away hydration and nutrition, and that comes to omissive euthanasia. So I wouldn't even say it's a first step to euthanasia. I would say we have already at least euthanasia by omission now in Italy.
Well, according to Catholic teaching, there's ordinary care like food and water must be given to the dying, of course, but not necessarily extraordinary care that extends life at all costs. Can you flesh that out, explain a little bit what that means?
Yes, well, we know Catholic moral teaching is very clear in saying that we obviously must take the normal, so ordinary and proportionate means to live. We all have to eat, we all have to drink. We do not have to take disproportionate means, obviously medical disproportionate means to live, and we don't have to take extraordinary means to live. What does that mean? An extraordinary mean is, for example, a mean that is very, very rare or hard to find, or otherwise a mean that causes very grave pain on the subject.
Of course, so many challenges to the pro-life movement there in Italy. Know that we will be praying for you and your ministry. Alessandro Fiore of Pro Vita joining us from Rome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Author and papal biographer George Weigel is presenting his new book in Rome this week. He tells our Juliet Lindley it reveals the personal side of his relationship with Pope John Paul II.
We went through some difficult times together, including the sex abuse crisis of 2002. His own intense suffering in 2003 and 2004. But throughout all of that, he was teaching all of us the title of this book, Lessons in Hope.
Weigel says this book differs from his other two books about JP2. Coming up, Season's Greetings, a look at the Christmas card being sent out by President Trump and his wife Melania. Plus, the Vatican's Man in the U.S., part 2 of Lauren Ashburn's exclusive interview with the Apostolic Nuncio, Archbishop Christophe Pierre. The White House releases the President and First Lady's official 2017 Christmas portrait. The Trumps are seen in a corridor in the White House known as the Cross Hall. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Pope Francis keeps up a busy schedule, but the Holy Father can't be everywhere, so he relies on inputs from his diplomats in countries around the world, including at the Vatican Embassy in Washington, D.C. That's where we pick up Lauren Ashburn's conversation with the Apostolic Nuncio.
Archbishop Christophe Pierre, thank you so much again for joining us. What is the Pope asking of the nuncios today? What are his priorities in dealing with local churches?
I think the Nuncio is really sent by the Pope to represent him. I think we have a duty, a responsibility to help the Pope to understand what's going on. I know that he has a great interest with the United States. But, I am the special envoy, if you say, special representative. So my job is to try to understand him, but also to help the local church and the country to understand the Holy Father. And one of the characteristics of the Holy Father, of this Pope, is to respect the diversity of the local churches. You know, he is already acting in that direction. So it's rather a complex work, because we need, he tells us, you know, you have to do that, but do that with creativity, with your own enthusiasm, you know, with your capacity to relate to people. This is the beauty of the Catholic Church.
I want to bring up two things that were in the news. First of all, earlier this week we celebrated the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. What influence did she have on you? You were nuncio in Mexico from 2007 to 2016.
I think the Our Lady of Guadalupe is an extraordinary, may I say, phenomenon. At the beginning of the colonization, 7 years after the arrival of the soldiers, you know, the invader in Mexico, the image appeared to the people. And, you know, most of the Indian people, the local people, you know, who had no idea about Jesus, about Mary, were fascinated by the apparition of this image and converted. So, and from that moment, that was 1531, imagine, you know, this image has been the reference of the culture, the religion, the life of the people in Mexico. What's that? It's amazing. So when you see that, you understand what is evangelization. Evangelization is a gift from God. Why do the people come? And some people have worked for 2 or 3 weeks, you know, just to give a greeting to the image. Why is that? You know, this is something extraordinary. So, yes, it has touched my life, and I've been able to see not only the image, which is quite, you know, I was saying that the other day. I've been 1.5 years here, and I miss my weekly encounter with Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Also in the news, the Pope gave an interview and suggested that the translation of Our Father, lead us not into temptation, could be changed the way that the French have changed it. And on both sides, there was positive and there was negative. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do understand that people are, even in our office, we have received letters, you know, saying that tell the Pope that it should be translated like that or like that. May I say that, you know, these changes of translations are not made lightly, you know. We need to be more faithful to the original, you know, and to maybe to the Greek and to, you know, to so I would say leave the experts, you know, give their opinion, and eventually, of course, it is the responsibility of the Holy Father to decide. You know?
Before we leave, I'd just like to wish you a Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much.
And ask what your plans are for Christmas.
Well, you know, I'm here. I'm here, very happy. You know, I have the privilege to be sent by the Holy Father to be his representative in this wonderful country. And so, as we are actually celebrating Christmas, Christmas is the moment when God is called Emmanuel, God with us. But also, the Church is God's presence in the human reality. And here we are. You know, I will have the privilege also to celebrate the midnight Mass at the Basilica of Our Lady of the Basilica of Washington. I will have also, on that occasion, the opportunity to have another contact with most of the people who watch your television.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you.
Thanks, Lauren, for that exclusive interview. Up next, music to his ears. Pope Francis enjoys a preview of a Christmas concert at the Vatican. And Collector's Creches, a Washington, D.C. couple shows off its impressive amount of nativity scenes. Pope Francis enjoys a preview of a Christmas concert that will take place tomorrow evening in the Vatican. During today's visit, the Pope said Christmas is a feast that removes barriers of indifference towards our neighbors. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. If you come from a Catholic home, you've probably set up your nativity scene by now. But imagine if you owned hundreds. Well, that's the case for one Washington couple who says their unique collection shows the message of the church is universal. I recently had the chance to see it at the Franciscan monastery where it's on display. It's a collection of Christmas creches you won't find anywhere else. Nativity scenes from Europe, Asia, South America, and the Middle East.
It's very substantial, yes. It takes a long time to pack them up and put them out.
Marguerite Sullivan will tell you she didn't grow up with creches in her home, but over the last 4 decades, she and her husband Roger have made up for it by collecting nativity scenes whenever and wherever they travel.
I don't think we ever imagined in our wildest dreams we'd end up with 500 when we made our first purchase.
It all started when Roger began traveling to Latin America for his job with the World Bank.
I was in Bolivia, which is quite a Catholic country, and I saw that they had these wonderful nativity scenes. So I bought one, thinking my wife and my kids would like to see them. And I bought one and took it home, and then I went back to Peru and I went back to Argentina. And every time I went, over the course of a couple of years, I'd bring back a nativity.
Then Marguerite started traveling for work too, adding to their diverse collection.
I find the different interpretations fascinating. The different materials you use, stone, wood, glass, straw, banana leaves, even cow horns I have found from the Galapagos. It's wonderful the different expressions that one can find in different parts of the world.
Marguerite says her favorite are the figures from the Holy Land, made of olive wood. St. Francis of Assisi is credited with staging the first nativity scene. That's one of the reasons the Sullivans decided to loan just over 100 to the Franciscan monastery in Washington this Christmas.
I think you can't help it when you see so many of these representations and manifestations, just to feel the glory of what we have and what our religion stands for, and the fact that we do have the incarnation. The Lord gave us Jesus to be our Savior, so it's a wonderful thing.
And having seen the display up close, it is incredible to see all the detail that has gone into crafting so many of those nativity scenes. Personally, it just reminds me of how Christmas can all be summed up in one scene. If you live in Washington, D.C. area or will be visiting soon, those nativities will be up in the Visitor Center of the Franciscan Monastery through January 7th. And we want to see your nativity scenes. Send us your pictures of your creches on our EWTN News Nightly Facebook page. We'll share some of your images next week on the show. And that wraps up our newscast for tonight and for this week. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, thank you for watching. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.